The slide that you have got in front of you shows on the left hand side all the DC motors that we have looked at already. Shunt motor, separately excited motor, series motor, permanent magnet motor, compounded motor. Okay. The other kind of motors, of course, are AC motors, which we are going to look at from now on. And the third category is other motors, which can be both AC and DC, or they could have special functions. Under AC motors, there are two primary categories, induction motor and synchronous motor. Synchronous motor runs at a constant speed, but it has its own unique niche areas of application. Induction motor is a lot more popular. It is easier to control the speed of induction motor compared to synchronous motor. Okay. When we are talking about AC motors, I guess we should be also looking at whether they are single phase motors or three phase motors. Synchronous motors mostly are going to be three phase motors. Induction motors can be both single phase and three phase. We will be talking about them in detail soon. Then the last category is other motors, which are special motors with unique advantages for a given set of applications. We will try to look at them once we are done with AC motors. Okay. DC motors, I don't want to go too much in this slide because we have already gone through this in sufficient detail. It's an overview of what we already have gone through. DC motor theory continues. Disadvantages. This may be something to look at carefully. The disadvantages of DC motors are here, which I had not specifically mentioned so far. Brush wear. Brushes connect to the rotating part, so they wear quite fast. That's one disadvantage. Sparks from the brushes. I think I referred to this in the past, that this is a serious concern because of the potential that it may cause accidents. And then there are electrical parameters like RF noise generated by brushes, which may interfere with equipment nearby, communication equipment nearby. Okay. There's a reference to a book here from where I think this PPT has been taken. Now, AC machines, as I was telling you last time, are either AC generators or AC motors. And another way to look at them is they are either single phase or three phase. And the third way to classify them is whether they are synchronous machines or induction machines. Synchronous machines, whether motor or generator, run at a constant speed. Take that for sure. Induction machines do not have to. Okay, at least that much you should remember. We are going to go through these two much more in detail. And other thing which I was trying to point out last time is that the DC generator essentially is an AC generator plus commutator. So in a DC generator, if you remove the commutator, you got an AC generator, single phase AC generator for sure. Unfortunately, AC generators have to supply very large powers and they have to be generally three phase. So armature currents will have to be very large. Even if you remove commutator, you would still have to deal with very large AC currents, which is problematic in terms of implementation. So, in a lot of cases for AC generation, when large powers are involved, we reverse the role of stator and rotor. In fact, stator will have the armature on it and rotor will have the field poles on it. Okay. And induction machines are very different anyway. I'll come to that later. Some theories, too much into that right now. Reluctance motor, it's one of the special kind of motors. I'll be talking about it later in detail, but at least remember the name of it. Many other special motors like hysteresis motors, stepper motors, BLDC, universal motor, etc., are very popular nowadays. And they are special variants of AC and DC motors that we have initially come up with. Okay, so that's the end of this small PPT. It's a question that you may not fully understand right now, but it will come back to you once we have gone through theories for AC machines. At the same power, which motor has higher efficiency, the synchronous motor or induction motor? Right now, you do not know much about any of them. So leave the answer as it is once you get the PPT, but you will be able to relate to it soon. That's my hope. Okay. Now, AC machines. A lot of things are written in this document, summarized from various sources, and you may not be able to relate to everything right away, but at least let's go through these bullet points. Synchronous machines are either synchronous generators, which are also known as alternators, or synchronous motors. These are invariably three-phase machines. Okay. Alternator means three-phase synchronous generator. Obviously, in case of alternator, the input will be rotary mechanical power and output will be three-phase electrical power. In case of a synchronous motor, it would be the opposite. The three-phase windings that are built on the stator can be either delta type or star type. Synchronous machines are called so because in these machines, the rotor speed N, capital N, is equal to a so-called synchronous speed Ns. What happens is, if you have a three-phase winding on the stator and you are energizing it, you will get a flux, magnetic flux produced on the insides of the stator, which will rotate at a constant speed, which is called synchronous speed, Ns. And rotor is in the center of the assembly. It will rotate also, but that speed does not have to be exactly equal to Ns in all cases. So we give it another symbol, capital N. Now for synchronous machines, it happens that these two values are equal. N and Ns are equal. For induction machines, they are not. Okay. And of course, both are measured in RPMs. Stator windings are 120 degree apart, obviously, because you want a three-phase winding. Okay, in case of motors, the three-phase winding is energized using three-phase supply, and the rotor rotates as a result. In case of a generator, it's the other way around. The synchronous speed can be very easily calculated by a formula which is given here: 120 F divided by P. F is the frequency of operation, P is the total number of poles on the rotor. Okay. Now, another interesting thing here is that rotor has poles on it which need to be energized to make them electromagnets. So you have to supply DC input to the rotor also. Rotor is rotating, you still supply DC input to it using a DC generator. It is possible because the currents going into rotor will not be very large. So it's okay to connect to them. Connecting to rotating conductors is difficult only when the currents are high. For lower currents, it's not such a major issue. So it's doable. However, this disadvantage remains that you have to feed the rotor also, besides feeding the stator. In case of DC motor, definitely. In case of synchronous motor, for sure. Okay, induction motors are another variety of the same construction. I'll come to that later, but at least be aware that they are not same as synchronous motors. So typically, a synchronous motor's cross section conceptually would look like this. The outer part, the stator, has three-phase windings on it in a large number of slots. And the inner part is the rotating part on which magnetic poles are there, which are energized by supplying DC current to them, DC current to the winding on them. Another thing is that rotor poles can be either mechanically built, that means you will be able to see poles physically, or for high speed, instead of that, you may go for realizing the poles electromagnetically, because for high speed rotors, mechanical construction is not very desirable. The poles start coming off as speed is high. So we prefer to create poles on the rotor electromagnetically by using windings. If the poles are physically visible, we call it salient pole rotor. And if the poles are electromagnetically simulated using windings on the rotor, then we call it cylindrical rotor, because then poles are not visible. And of course, the stator has three-phase supply coming in. And the result is interesting. If you have three-phase supply coming into the stator, it will produce a rotating flux in the area inside the stator. And you are also supplying DC to the field windings on the rotor. So that would produce another magnetic flux which will not be rotating. One flux is rotating, the other is not. System doesn't like it. The other flux also tries to start, or at least tries to align itself with the rotating flux. Of course, the rotating flux is rotating quite fast in general. So the effect is that although rotor is trying to rotate, because of the inertia involved, it may not be able to start rotating unless you give some initial starting push to the rotor. Then it starts rotating for sure. So one disadvantage of synchronous motors is that they are not self-starting. You may need to give some initial mechanical push, or may have to come with some other method to get the motor started. But once it starts, the rotor's flux locks with the rotating flux of the stator, and rotor also starts rotating exactly at the synchronous speed, ns. Okay. Rotor either runs at ns or it doesn't run, simply. So synchronous motor is a doubly excited motor because one is the DC input to the rotor, the other is the three-phase input to the stator. The stator produces a rotating flux, I told you that already, and the rotor produces a constant flux. At a particular instant, rotor and stator poles might be of the same polarity, causing repulsive force on the rotor. Immediately later, the poles will be of the opposite polarity, so the rotor will start getting attracted. As a result, the rotor may not rotate at all. It may instead make noise like it is about to start, but it is not starting. That is why I said initial starting method is important for such motors. Rotor will try to start, but will not be able to start because of the inertia, because the polarity of the rotating flux produced by stator is changing very fast, and rotor is unable to catch up. One method is straightforward. You give a push to the rotor, mechanically speaking, and then it starts rotating, and then it catches up with the rotating flux produced by the stator. There are many other methods also to achieve the same. Prime mover is a word reserved for that entity which is connected to the rotating part. Okay. I'll come to the formal definition soon. In case of generator, prime mover has to supply the rotary input power. And prime mover can be several things. It could be a DC motor also, or it could be a turbine, or it could be something else also. Prime mover is a generic word for the entity which is supplying the rotary mechanical power in case of generators, in case of AC generators. Okay, so the rotor, as I said, could have poles which are either physically present or electromagnetically simulated. For low speed, the physical poles are okay, and that construction is known as salient poles, SALIENT, salient poles. For high speed, the poles start coming off, and it's not a good scene for sure. So we, instead of having mechanical poles, we have electromagnetically simulated poles on the rotor also. Then the rotor is known as cylindrical rotor. A lot of detail is here. We will be touching upon it later. The generators that are supplying power to your homes are all synchronous generators, three-phase synchronous generators. And several of them run in parallel to generate the high amount of power generated or needed, high amount of power needed. Okay. A diesel generator can be a prime mover also, for sure. All kinds of turbines are available, hydroelectric, gas turbine, etc., which can also be prime movers. Now, this is probably not readable to you, but I have got the same info later also, so I'll skip this for now. Turbine. What is the formal definition. Turbines transform rotational energy from a fluid that is picked up by a rotor system into usable work or energy. Basically, the turbine's job is to take the energy available from natural sources, hydroelectric sources, for instance, and convert that energy into rotary energy. This is not a course on turbines, so I will not give you too much detail, but at least the names must be known to you. Turbines can be wind turbines, where the wind pressure is used to create the rotation. They can be hydro turbines, where the water pressure using large dams is used to create the rotation. High pressure gas can also be used to create high speed rotation. Steam can also be used. Nuclear sources can be used. They ultimately produce a lot of high temperature, which is used to produce the gas. So essentially, nuclear reactions ultimately run a gas turbine, for sure, or a steam turbine. Now, what is a prime mover? Prime mover is a more general term compared to turbines. A prime mover is defined as an initial source of rotating power. It could be a DC motor also, by the way. So prime mover does not have to be always a natural source. It could be a man-made source also. So turbines are one example of prime movers. The prime mover, another definition is the prime mover is a device that imparts power to another device, imparts motion to another device. That turns a generator. Thermal prime movers, of course, are diesel generators, etc. Non-thermal prime movers are also there, like hydroelectric power, wind power, etc. So be aware of all this, because electrical generators need prime movers. This is the information which was there in one of the previous pages, which was unreadable. What are the types of AC generators? One way to classify them is single phase versus three phase. And under single phase, you can have either rotating armature, that means a conventional construction that we saw for DC generators. The field poles will be fixed on the stator, and rotor will have the high current carrying conductors. This method is okay as long as power requirement is not too large. But for large powers, as I said, even in case of single phase AC generators, you would rather have armature non-rotating and poles rotating. So the second construction is stationary armature type. Armature is the part that produces the required electrical power. That part can be made either rotating or non-rotating. Non-rotating is important because you want high powers to be drawn, and connecting to a stationary armature is better if high powers are involved compared to rotating armature. So single phase AC generators can be either rotating armature type or stationary armature type. Three phase generators, of course, can be delta type and Y type for sure. I have not mentioned it here, but leaving that aside, They can also be stationary armature type or rotary armature type in theory. In practice, rotary armature type is almost ruled out for three-phase generators because powers involved are very high. So you would rather not go for that. So I've deliberately crossed out that option. Induction variety, let's not bother about it right now. I'll come back to induction machines soon. Okay. Now let's start with a single phase AC generator. Theory is very much similar to that of a DC generator. You have, let's say, static poles and rotating conductors. The frequency of signal generated is given by this simple formula. N is the speed of rotation of the armature, P is the number of poles on the stator. Okay, and that gives you NP divided by 120 gives you frequency in hertz. N is in RPM. P is, of course, an even number, as usual. For lower power requirements, AC generators mentioned in 1 work well. However, if power requirements are higher, that is usually the case because society needs a lot of electrical power. The rotating conductors start becoming impractical because they have to carry large currents. We generally make the armature voltage generating part, we generally take that part to the stator and let the rotor carry the magnetic poles. Because then high currents will not be necessary on the rotor. The two types of constructions mentioned are known as rotating armature type and rotating field type. Okay. Rotating armature and versus stationary armature. Or you can say rotating armature versus rotating field. That's another way of saying the same thing. Now, three-phase AC generators, theory is not conceptually very different. Only thing is now we have three-phase windings on this stator. Okay, so stator is carrying the armature windings and rotor invariably now will have the field poles on it. Okay. The stator, some detail about the construction. The stator is housed with the three-phase windings in either delta or Y configuration. As the rotor rotates, it creates a rotating magnetic flux. The flux is not rotating if rotor is not rotating, but you are deliberately rotating the rotor using a prime mover. So flux will start rotating. Flux produced by the rotor. This flux cuts the three-phase windings on the stator, and that generates the three-phase power coming out of the stator. Okay. AC power across the 3 or 4 windings can be connected to the rest of the world. 4 wires will be there in case of Y configuration. 3 wires will be there in case of delta configuration. Okay. The rest of the world will be connected to this stator. The rotor can be of salient pole types. That means physical poles are visible to you, which is preferred for lower speeds, or non-salient type, where poles are electromagnetically simulated on the rotor. And non-salient type is also known as cylindrical. This generator is known as synchronous generator or alternator. Now, because powers are high, lot of temperature will be generated, especially on the stator and even on the rotor side, actually. You have to consider cooling very seriously. Most of these generators are housed in big buildings, and there are all kinds of methods to make sure that temperature does not go below, it does not go above the safe value. Otherwise, windings will melt and there will be serious complications. Cooling mechanisms for large alternators include, first of all, natural wind cooling, which is okay for smaller powers. Forced air cooling, that means using big fans, which is better than the previous option, but may not be enough in many cases. Water pipes running around the entire assembly to cool the whole thing down. Air conditioning the whole plant. These are various options that you got to play with. Depending on what you are looking at, you may decide to go for one of them or maybe a combination of two of them or more than two of them. Regular maintenance of alternator includes dust removal. As alternators run at high speeds and generate a lot of power and they have a lot of openings all over, dust gets in. Periodically, we have to shut them down for maintenance. And maintenance procedures include dust removal, replacing worn out coils, worn out brushes also, malfunctioning bolts will have to be replaced, nuts also same thing, and so on. This is what engineers at Kota Thermal Power Station are always obsessed with, maintenance of the generators. That's why we have so many in parallel all the time. Even if one is down, the others will continue to supply power. The rotor generally has the DC windings, field windings, which are rotating, of course, and the stator generally has the stationary windings, three-phase windings, of course. For single-phase generators, that winding will be single-phase, of course. But I'm talking three-phase generators right now. A single generator of this kind, where stationary armature is involved and rotating field is involved, can easily generate megawatts of power. Okay. Terminal voltages as high as 33 kilovolt can be obtained from a single generator of this kind. Stationary armature permits you to go to those high values without serious complications. The stator consists of a slotted laminated core. Laminated core is there for stator to reduce iron losses or core losses if you want. And in these slots, three-phase windings are fitted. There's a lot of detail here, by the way. Again, I'm not showing you detailed drawings. There's no time for all that. The things are very similar to what we saw for DC generators. But here, the amount of power that you are drawing is much, 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 much higher. And even the voltages are much, much, much higher. Okay. That's why stator is housing the armature. Things are very different from the implementation point of view. Theories are not changing much. Each phase winding has a number of coils. Okay, fine. Some detail that you may not be interested in right now, but I have written it out. Okay, you may not have full understanding of what I have written under G right now. Maybe later we'll come back. The rotor can be low speed. Low speed means 200 RPM also. High speed means something like 600 RPM, 800 RPM, 3000 RPM even. For high speed, you have to have cylindrical rotor where poles are electromagnetically produced. For low speeds, you can have physical poles called salient poles. Now, rotor diameter, there's a lot of design considerations in these things. I'm just giving you a gist of it. Rotor diameter should be small enough to keep the surface speed down to a safe value. The outer portion of the rotor should move at a speed which should not be too high to make it mechanically safe. So rotor diameter cannot be too large. There are a lot of equations here to guide you, but I'm avoiding all that. This is not the right course for all that. So if rotor diameter cannot be large, but rotor volume has to be large for high powers. So you have to make the rotor long enough then. Of course, that means cooling challenges. Longer the rotor, bigger are the cooling challenges for the rotor also. The heat generated in long rotors cannot be conducted away quickly enough to limit the temperature rise in the core of the rotor to a value that will protect the windings and the insulation on the windings. We end up completely enclosing the alternator. In fact, even stator has problems. It has also got a lot of temperature. So we end up enclosing the entire assembly, entire alternator. And you at least minimum requirement is that forced air ventilation must be there, if nothing else, so that the heat is carried away to the atmosphere. The cooling air from the fans should be filtered to keep it clean. And sometimes it is washed also using water vapor spray, so that dust doesn't get in that way in the alternator. These are issues that bother mechanical engineers all the time, but even you, if you end up in power industry, will see these issues on a day-to-day basis. Washing the air has an extra advantage that air becomes cooler, which further helps in cooling the machine. Yes. If air is not sufficient in cooling the temperature down, then you may have to employ hydrogen, which may be costly, but in very large generators, you have no choice. I'm sorry I'm giving you a lot of practical details, but as engineers, you have to appreciate all this. As we have already seen that you need to supply DC voltage, in fact DC current, to the field windings on the rotor. So a small DC generator is required. It is called exciter or DC exciter. So all alternators are fitted with a small DC generator called DC exciter. Again, salient pole rotor sees looks like this. The cross section looks like this. The poles are physically coming out. Wound rotor, of course, doesn't have that construction. Now, a simple equation, almost similar to the equation that we saw in case of transformers, is available. It has been derived actually based on electromagnetism for voltage generated per phase, RMS value, in a three-phase synchronous generator, which is also known as alternator. 4.443 actually is twice pi divided by square root of 2. Phi is the flux. I've given all the parameters here. Flux per pole. F is the frequency of operation. NP is the number of turns in each phase. This will be given to you. KD is an empirical constant which is determined by the winding direction. At least that much you would remember. This value will be given to you for anyway. Kp is a constant which is going to depend on the pitch of the coils of the windings. The Kd and Kp values are normally given to you. A simple numerical example. Calculations are not difficult, but you need to appreciate the numbers involved, the kind of numbers involved. Calculate the speed at which a large 24-pole rotor must be run to generate 50 Hertz supply. Equation to use is very simple, NP divided by 120. Even mechanical engineers remember it all the time. N is on the unknown, F is 50 Hertz, P is 24. So you take the calculations from there. So speed needed for the rotor is 250 RPM. So a wind turbine would probably do the job. That is the implication. Because number of poles is quite large, a wind turbine hopefully will be able to act as the prime mover in this case. Problem 2. Oh, by the way, here in problem 1, if I had reduced P to say 4, then the value of N required would have been much higher. Then a wind turbine would not have been able to do the job. You may have needed a gas turbine. It's an equation which is simple, but it has a lot of practical implications. Number of poles versus N for a given frequency. Based on that, the choice of turbine will be made. Calculate the line voltage. This is problem number 2. Calculate the line voltage of a 50 Hertz star-star alternator given the following details. Okay. Equation to use is already given to you. You have to use this equation. All the values are supplied in that problem, I think. F is given, phi is given, Kd is given, Kp is given, Np, number of turns in the coil is given per pole. The catch here is that the value that you will calculate using this equation will be the phase voltage magnitude, while the question is about line voltage. And it's a star alternator. You know that for star star systems, line voltage magnitude is square root of 3 multiplied by phase voltage magnitude. So that you have to keep in mind. EG will be easy enough to calculate based on this equation and the given numerical values. It will work out to about 4460 volts. But line to line voltage will be square root of 3 multiplied by that value, which is 7725 volts. If I had given you delta system here, delta alternator, then EG would have been same as line to line voltage. Okay. Now, here also, we define voltage regulation as no load voltage minus full load voltage divided by full load voltage and the entire thing multiplied by 100. Of course, we are talking only magnitudes of voltages. These are AC generators, so voltages will have phase also. But for regulation calculation, it is only the magnitudes of the voltages that matter. Okay. This problem probably is very easy to do as far as calculations are concerned. But appreciate the physical significance of the result. A three-phase star-connected alternator has an output voltage of 3300 volt at full load with unity power factor. Power factor is 1. When the load is removed, that means you have open circuit, and excitation, that means the field current remains unchanged. So phi remains unchanged. The voltage rises to 3350. Calculate the percentage regulation. So no load voltage is 3350 volt. Full load voltage is 3300 volt. You take the difference and divide the result by 3300 and then multiply the whole thing by multiply the whole thing by 100 to get the percentage value. You will get 1.52%, I think. But this is not enough. For AC generators, voltage regulation is always specified at a certain power factor. If you say 1.52%, it's not enough. You should tell everybody at what power factor did you measure it. This is why they have mentioned unity power factor. So the correct answer in case of AC generators is voltage regulation of so much percentage at such and such power factor. And if power factor is not unity, and instead let's say it's 0.8, then you also have to mention whether power factor was leading or lagging. Then only information will be considered complete. That's why I've written the answer very carefully. 1.52% at unity power factor. Now, without going into theory right now, let me give you a snapshot of how behavior of output voltage in a three-phase synchronous generator, in a three-phase alternator rather, looks like as load current goes up. At no load, of course, you will have a flat line. In fact, there is no load current at all. So that is the reference point. Interestingly, what we have found both in theory and in practice is that if the power factor of the load is leading, that means current is leading the voltage, then the full load voltage is higher than the no load voltage, which is what actually we saw here, I think. No, here we didn't see that. Fine. And if it's unity power factor, then full load voltage will be slightly lower than the no load voltage. That's what we saw in this one. Okay. And for lagging power factor, the drop in the full load voltage compared to no load value is even higher. So this graph, although it is not quantitatively correct, but it's a qualitative description at least of how the output voltage increases or decreases with the nature of the power factor. We will be doing numerical examples on all this anyway, using equivalent circuits, and these things will come back to us at that time. In case of DC generators, this was not the case. The full load voltage was always lower than the no load voltage. In case of AC generators, nature of power factor matters. For leading power factor, it's a very interesting result, supported by theory. Now, parallel operation of alternators, it is a must if you want higher powers. One generator cannot give you more than, say, 1 or 2 megawatt. So you have to have several of them in parallel. Maybe even one generator can give you 10 megawatt. Even that may not be enough. Maybe you can get even 1 gigawatt from a single generator nowadays. But even that may not be enough. So you will have to have parallel operation to get larger powers. Power stations typically use a large number of alternators in parallel to supply large currents at an almost constant voltage. Output waveform and frequency need to be as identical as possible for all the generators, obviously. Otherwise, there will be confusion in the system. Phase sequence has to be the same. If it is positive sequence in one generator, it better be the same in all the generators. All voltages generated by generator should be as equal as possible. That means magnitudes. Okay, value of EG this value should be almost the same for all generators. Then only parallel operation will make sense. These are severe demands. We try our best to meet them. Even the phase angle among the voltages must be strictly 120 degree, 120 degree, 120 degree, and 0 degree for the same phase in all the generators. 120 degree for the same phase in the other, in all the generators, and so on. The generator ratings means total kVA that it can operate on, or it is recommended that it should be operated on. The recommended operating voltage, frequency, and whether it's delta generator or Y generator. This much is going to be mentioned on the nameplate of the generator for sure. Many more things will be there in the data sheet also. Problem 4. Calculate the power loading of in kilowatt of a 3-phase 415 volt 50 hertz alternator rated at 150 kVA at 0.8 power factor if the load has a power factor of 0.8 or 0.6. If load power factor is 0.8 and they are not telling you whether it's lagging or leading, it's probably not important for this calculation. Then the power drawn, the real power drawn will be 150 kVA multiplied by 0.8. That will be kilowatts, of course. So 120 kilowatt will be drawn. And the voltage is given as 415 volt, right? And it's a 3-phase system. The total power from a 3-phase system, I have shown it in the past, is given by square root of 3 VLL IL cos phi. So use this formula to calculate the line current. And of course, with 0.6 power factor, this value instead of 120 kilowatt will go down to 90 kilowatt, and the remaining calculation will be similar. Hunting is another practical problem in alternators, even in motors, I suppose, but let's look at alternators. The driving torque of the diesel engine or any prime mover is not constant, unfortunately. So RPM is not always a constant value. Like it or not, that is the reality. We try our best to keep RPM as constant as possible by using mechanical gadgets like flywheel. But even then, you may not get 100% constant N. So what would happen is the magnitudes of the voltages generated in each generators will be slightly different from each other. And that will produce local currents in the system because of potential difference from one generator to another. So the machine will constantly hunt for a steady state, which may never be achieved. This is why it is called hunting. Machine is hunting for a steady state all the time. It's a very serious issue. I don't think we'll be dealing with it in a lot of detail, but at least be aware of this word hunting. System is unable to get to a steady state stable condition all the time. Now, synchronous motor is the opposite of the alternator. Windings, etc., are the same, just that now you are supplying three-phase input rather than drawing three-phase output from it. So everything works in the reverse. The synchronous speed is now given by this same equation, which is previous equation written in a different manner. And rotor will also run exactly at this speed because of the nature of the construction. Okay. Stator is quite similar to the stator of an alternator, has three-phase windings energized by external three-phase supply. It produces a rotating flux which rotates at this speed. And as I said before, the motor is not self-starting. You may have to give it some initial push, but then it starts, and rotor also rotates exactly at ns. Salient pole construction obviously will be better for lower speeds. Of course, you have to supply DC to the poles on the rotor. So this is a two-input motor. There's one three-phase AC input to the stator and another DC input to the rotor. It's doable though. Principle of operation is quite simple. It is the generator action in reverse now. That's it. So let's not go too far into. Now, induction motor is a very interesting variation of synchronous motor. In synchronous motor, one major disadvantage is that it cannot start by itself. And the other one is that you need a DC input also to the rotor. Both the disadvantages are overcome by short circuiting the conductors on the rotor. I'll come to it in a minute, which actually creates an induction effect. There's no DC input to the rotor anymore. In fact, rotor windings are short circuited. So the flux produced by the stator actually produces induced voltage, induced EMF, in fact, in the rotor windings. And that induced EMF generates its own flux, which opposes the main flux. And in the process, the rotor starts rotating. But it never rotates at the synchronous speed. In fact, it rotates at a speed which is always slightly lower than the synchronous speed. This is like a transformer where secondary is rotating, short-circuited secondary, which is rotating. This is why it is called induction motor. It's a very popular motor. In fact, more popular than synchronous motor. But synchronous motor is unbeatable when it comes to constant speed requirements. The majority of AC motors used in industry are of induction type. They are rugged, that means very strong, unbreakable almost, and have a high degree of reliability. In fact, the fans in your room are all induction motors. They are single-phase induction motors, by the way. They are using single-phase induction motors. You see how rugged your fans are. Even if they fall, they don't break much. The stator of induction motor is very similar to the stator of a synchronous motor. Okay, three-phase windings will be there, and they will be fed from a three-phase supply. The rotor, however, is quite different. Rotor has a squirrel cage type of construction. I'll explain that in a minute. Squirrel cage is a nickname actually given by somebody who had a sense of humor. Squirrel cage construction means this. The rotor doesn't have thin wires, thin conductors on it. Instead, it has solid copper or aluminum bars on it, which are short circuited on both sides using metallic rings. So essentially, you are short circuiting the rotor windings. That is the theory. And implementation is done by using aluminum bars or copper bars to make the construction very rugged. Rotor does not need any excitation. No DC input required. This motor is actually self-starting. You don't need to push the rotor at all. The actual speed of the rotor is slightly lower than the synchronous speed. And the difference between the two speeds is denoted by a concept called slip, S-L-I-P. The notation normally used for slip is small s. In percentage, slip is defined as synchronous speed minus rotor speed minus actual rotor speed divided by synchronous speed and the result multiplied by 100. A slip of 5 to 10% is normally seen in most of the induction motors. The rotor is always about 5%. Rotor has a speed about 5 to 10% lower than the synchronous speed, which is the speed of the flux produced by the stators. Current versus speed, I have not proven it yet, but I'm giving you the basic idea right away. For an induction motor, speed versus current behavior looks like this. The higher the speed, the lower the current that you can draw. There's a recommended range of operation, which is denoted by a rectangle here, beyond which you should normally not go. Torque versus speed, I'll prove it later mathematically, but take it from me right now. There is always an optimum value of speed for which torque produced by induction motor will be maximum. But it is safer not to push the motor to that value because you are very close to the point where motor might break down. So slightly lower than this optimum will be the best point of operation. In fact, they are showing you a rectangle here, which is even much safer than the maximum value. Rated torque is much lower than the breakdown torque. We are playing safe. We don't want to destroy the motor. I think this document, oh, it has more things in it. Rotating field versus rotating armature. This page gives you a lot of pros and cons. I think I have told you most of it already. But this particular page was taken from somewhere. I don't know where I took it from, but it tells you once again what I have told you. So read it later. Some more pictorial descriptions. rotating field versus, no, sorry, this is salient pole. You can see the poles physically. And we are assuming rotating field, of course, in this case. And this is the rotating armature, where the field actually is being produced by stationary poles. So these are the two possibilities in theory. One of them is what we, the bottom one is the one that we were using for DC generators and DC motors also, right? But the alternative that we have explored seriously for AC machines is the one shown on the top. Field poles are made to rotate so that armature currents can be very high. There's no rotation involved in the armature at all. Yeah. Basically, poles are stimulated here using electromagnetic windings. Okay. So non-salient construction essentially means you don't see poles physically. This is called squirrel cage construction. I had tried to draw it in my notes, but I have taken a very good picture here. You have aluminum bars, solid aluminum bars running through at slight angle compared to the axis of the cylinder. And there are short circuiting rings on both sides. This construction was given the name squirrel cage because somebody had sense of humor. This, if you look at the cross section, it is a hollow cylinder. And they said if a squirrel goes in, it will never be able to come out. So don't take that word squirrel cage as if it has some technical meaning. But this word is used commercially, even in books. But don't try to interpret the word squirrel in any other manner. It simply means it's a cage for a squirrel. If the squirrel had gotten in, it would have hard time getting out. Okay. Yeah, this is how the cage looks like. The rotor had a lot of bars, aluminum bars or copper bars, and two short circuiting rings. And this is a cage where conceptually, if you can think of a squirrel going in and then unable to get out. From the theory point of view, an induction motor can be seen as a transformer in which the secondary has been short circuited and secondary is physically rotating. When we draw equivalent circuits, that theory will come back to us. The squirrel cage motor, or rotor rather, is more suited to applications requiring low starting torques, such as centrifugal pumps or our home fans. Sorry, the rotor winding, if assembled without the laminations, resembles a metal cage, giving rise to the often used name squirrel cage motor. Okay. There's a lot more here. You can read it. There are some practical things. It may not be perfectly needed right now, but it's good to have them in front. Now, synchronous motor versus induction motor comparison. It is worth looking at. And we are talking three-phase motors right now. Three-phase synchronous motor is complicated in construction, obviously. You need two inputs also. Three-phase induction motor is simpler. especially if you make the squirrel cage type of rotor. Rotor can be, by the way, of the conventional kind also, where you have thin conductors on it. That is called cylindrical rotor. Three-phase synchronous motor is not self-starting, but three-phase induction motor is. DC exciter needed for three-phase induction, three-phase synchronous motor, but it's not needed for three-phase induction. N equal to Ns for the synchronous motor, but in case of induction motor, that's not the case. In fact, Ns will always be larger than N. Speed control is not AG for synchronous motors. For induction motors, it is much more AG. As load increases, the synchronous motor, okay, I've not told you about power angle right now, so let's forget that. Yeah, I'll come to all these things when we draw equivalent circuits. Synchronous motors are costly for sure compared to induction motors. But there are applications where you have to bear that cost. This numerical problem is not solved here. In some other places, I'll show you the solution. Now, I have a lot of notes. I don't know how much to show you, but let's see. Okay, one document which may be worth a serious look is here. It has both theory and practice combined. We'll first talk about synchronous generators in detail, including the equivalent circuit, etc. And then we will go to synchronous motors. And after that, we'll go to induction motors. That's the plan. After induction motors are done, special motors will be considered, and that will probably be the end of all the AC machines discussion, at least. Synchronous machines are principally used as alternating current generators or alternators. They supply the electrical power used by all sectors of modern societies and so on. Synchronous generators usually operate, many of them operate together in parallel. I've told you all this. Are built in large units. Their ratings are very large, hundreds of megawatts. In fact, even gigawatt kind of generation is being done nowadays. They convert mechanical power to electric power, obviously, you know this. For high-speed machines, the prime movers are usually steam turbines. If RPM more than, say, 300 or 400 is needed, you will have to go for steam turbines or gas turbines. Hydroelectric turbines do not give you more than, I don't know how much exactly, but roughly 500 to 600 RPM, not more than that. Yeah, low speed turbines are usually hydro turbines. Smaller machines are sometimes used in private generators, obviously for backup generators, etc., like we have in our campus. Probably we have smaller alternators compared to what Kota Thermal Power Station is using. Now, types of synchronous machines, obviously rotating armature type or rotating field type. These are the two distinct conceptual differences. I've told you all this, so I'm quickly running through it. I would rather move to something which is new here. Yeah, we have gone through all this. There are some 3D pictures here, which are, yeah, this is what I wanted to show you. Construction. The stator is shown here. Rotor is not there yet. Three-phase windings are in the slots on the stator. You probably don't see anything because they're all encapsulated. The core is made of some iron material and the core is laminated. And the outer part, which is known as housing or yoke, yoke, is made of steel. I think I'll have to stop soon, but just give me two more. Yeah, starter details. You see the slots here. They have given you a conceptual 3D picture here. Rotor. This is how the rotor looks like. It's coming out here. Lot of details related to construction are given here. These are very heavy assemblies, by the way. Their weight could be hundreds of kgs sometimes, depending on the megawatt rating of the generator. These could be very large cylinders.